and good morning to everybody joining us here today. Build Stuff 2021, we're on day 3 and you're at the Saturn stage. For all those people who went to the party last night, I hope you had a fantastic time and you're not suffering too much today. We have a lineup of fantastic speakers again for you today, and to get the ball rolling, I would like to welcome to the stage Radu Vunvulea. Radu, hello, how are you?
Hi guys, I'm very good and very excited to be part of this great conference.
Where are you joining us from today?
Well, I'm joining from the middle of Transylvania, from a city called Cluj-Napoca. It's a very beautiful city, full with students and with young people. So I really invite you to join and to discover this great city.
Sounds awesome. I've really got to travel to that part of the world at some point. I need to get out of the flat country that I'm in and see some more scenery. I miss that since leaving the UK. Well, I don't want to take too much of your time. So, Radu, the floor is yours. Take it away.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining this session. So we have around 40-45 minutes to talk about cloud migration and what are the most important things that we should be aware of when we're doing a cloud migration or we are involved more or less in a migration project from on-prem to cloud or even from a cloud vendor to another. The main focus and the examples are from Microsoft Azure, but we will see during the session that most of the content, most of the concepts, and a lot of tools are common to AWS, to GCP, to Azure, and even to other vendors from APAC, like, for example, Alibaba. So what does a cloud migration mean and why it is important? Well, a cloud migration is very important nowadays because starting with March 2020, even if before there were a lot of companies and large enterprises that were investing in doing migration to cloud and adoption cloud. In the last 1 year and a half, the cloud adoption grew very, very fast. And there was not enough time for the technical team and even not enough budget to be able to fulfill all the needs and to think from the beginning to all the pillars and all items that you need to be aware of at the moment in time when you are doing a cloud migration. So what we will try to do in the next minutes is to cover what are the crucial things that we need to be aware of, to take them into account, and to put them on the table at the moment in time when we are working on such a project. And let's start with an example. Let's imagine that you are working to warehouse management systems. There are around 800 employees that are working 24/7 in 3 warehouses that are in 10-kilometer radius, and you need to rebuild the warehouse management system and to do the migration from their on-prem servers to cloud. Now, a lot of things are promised at the beginning. You have a clear timeline, a clear budget. Nevertheless, after 1 year, you end up with 200% additional cost, and stakeholders are frightened of the final cost because still, even if the system is almost ready, the core features are not yet implemented. Initially, the program was 9 months. We are already one year and a few months past, and still they're missing a lot of things. And the current forecast is 36 months. And the operational cost that was initially planned to be reduced with around 25-30% now are already 1.5 times more than the initial ones. And at the moment in time, a lot of stakeholders, business stakeholders, are questioning themselves. I'm doing the right thing. Should I migrate to cloud? Should I adopt cloud, or should I stick on their on-prem system because it seems that the cloud is not a good fit. It's too expensive and it takes too much to be able to adopt cloud. Well, many times the problem is not the cloud itself, it's our approach, how we are doing the adoption. And many times we are reinventing the wheel over and over again because we are saying that the context of the project of the customer is not the same as the one that is provided from the template and things like that provided by each cloud vendor. I hope that I made you interested about the topic and about the session. I would like to present myself. My name is Radu Vunvulea. I'm Microsoft Regional Director and Microsoft Azure MVP. And what is very relevant in this context is my first production cloud project went live in 2010 on Azure. And starting from then, I was working, I would say 95% of my time on Azure and AWS. If you want to talk with me or to find more about me, you can find me on LinkedIn or on Twitter and just drop me and let's have a talk anytime. Now, where we are now? Well, 90% of companies are on the cloud. Not fully, but still they're using a small service from cloud. It could be Office 365, can be the storage, can be the processing, can be their GPU rendering for ML, maybe, and things like that. The cost optimization is the primary reason for business stakeholders why they want to do the cloud migration, the cloud adoption. This is why it's very important to fulfill their needs and to ensure that we are keeping the KPI cost in the boundary that they are expecting, because in the end, they are driven by money and by the cost. Now, why we are doing a migration? Well, as we can see, more and more enterprises are embracing cloud. We see a continuous acceleration of public cloud adoption is especially, I don't know about you, but I think that nowadays almost every customer, every greenfield project or existing project that we are starting, it's involving cloud more or less. But the good part here, and I seen it in the last 12 months, is the cloud adoption type is evolving, meaning that from the classical lift and shift and infrastructure as a service, I'm seeing more and more needs of platform as a service, of software as a service, and this is great because the real juice, the real benefits on cloud, not on the IaaS part, it's more on the PaaS and SaaS. And on that area, you can make the stakeholder happy and reduce the cost or improve the business. And yes, almost all organizations are struggling to keep the spending of the cloud under control. And why? Take, for example, on an on-prem system, if you have the forecast of 10,000 K consumption per month, it's not very easy to go over it because you have the same physical machines. In the cloud, if you do a commitment and you have the budget for 10K per month, and you have still 10 days to go from that month, and you are already at 12,000 consumption, you cannot stop the services because you're out of business. So you will need to accept the cost spending. And many times, even if you have alerts and notification, you cannot do too much about that. And I don't see very often teams, cloud ops team and cloud economics team that are really go deeper in that side to understand why the price increase and what they could do about that. So what's next? We will talk about why a cloud migration fails, because if you understand why it's failing, we know exactly what we can do to improve it. From this point of view, we will focus on CAF, Cloud Adoption Framework, that Microsoft Azure is providing, and we'll identify what are the right tools and what are the right templates from CAF that can make our life much, much easier and can improve the cloud adoption part. And in the end, we'll take a look on some migration strategy and we'll not take a look on the classical ones. I have 2 or 3 of them that I want to approach just to make you aware and to make all of us aware that they exist. And also we should be taking them into account, and also we should analyze them. So how a cloud migration can fail? There are so many things that can go wrong from the day 0, from the day first until before going in production. Time, budget, scope, quality metrics, lack of clear KPIs. And I think that the lack of clear KPIs, business KPIs, is one of the most important things at the beginning that doesn't exist, and automatically make harder for the business to monitor and to have a clear requirement. What is my expectation from this point of view? So why does a cloud migration fail? First of all, is the failure to adapt to the cloud. It's not the same way as you would run a system on-prem. Even if you're just doing infrastructure as a service migration or lift and shift, there are still something that you need to change and you need to be aware of. Cloud is built in such a way that only you can spin resources only when you need them. And you need to keep them on specific tiers only as long as you need. This is something that is not done very, very often. And also for on-prem system, the automation, the orchestration part, and the full DevOps automation cycle and cloud ops management is not very often. And it's not very common for on-prem system versus the cloud ones that are built on full automation and automatical orchestration. And this has a high impact from the processes and from the expectation point of view related to how you would like to build such a system. Take into account that 3 or 4 application or systems that are migrating to cloud and there's a fail are moved back to the on-prem. And why? Because IT people, the people that are involved in the team are not able to express in from the business point of view, from the KPIs point of view, why they failed. What was the problem? What were they lacking of? And in the first phases of the project, even if it's just the cloud adoption and the cloud migration, you need to have the business stakeholders on the table. You need to understand what are the core drivers and also to have the commitment from the business. And why? Because the business commitment is very important here to ensure that they will facilitate through all the organization, the awareness and the education part to make people to understand that a system that was migrating to cloud will be managed and will behave a little bit different. Because of this, when you migrate to cloud, you need to have a cloud operation model. And this is not very common to have because the lack of procedures in the case of a failure or the lack of tracking and logging capabilities make us ask ourselves, well, why specific quality metrics are not fulfilled or why the cost is growing up every month. It's not because we don't have the right information. All the information is there, but we need to ensure that we are tracking and we are doing the matching and alignment with all the other data and content that we are gathering. So there are 6 things that are very relevant here. One of the causes is lack of planning. We are starting from day 0 without knowing exactly what is the strategy, where we want to be, how we are mapping the business driver to the migration plan. We have a wrong migration approach. We don't many times invest enough time to build a vision, to build a strategy, to build the templates and the landing zones that would enable us to have that blueprints to be able to replicate when we are doing a migration. Don't think about a migration or migrating on one system, no. Think about an enterprise migration where you have 100, 1,000 or 5,000 different applications and you need to migrate them on the cloud. Having a clear strategy and some pattern that can be reused will ensure that you will have success. Another main cause is no testing. Oh yes, you can test cloud. You can do testing on the templates, on the way how you spin up resources and so on. Of course, you don't need to test the services and the capability that is offered by cloud, but you need to ensure that you are testing the thing that you are doing behind the scene to ensure that they are kept in the same way as you would expect. Governance, it's most of the time ignored. Nobody gives too much time and don't care about the governance, especially at the beginning. And they say, well, we need governance only when we go in the production. Not really. You need from day one the governance, the identity management, the compliance part, because even if you are not in production, you are still using cloud services to be able to build a solution and you need to ensure that you know how to manage all the resources. The integration is another very important part, because you will need to integrate with third parties, with on-prem system, and you need to know what are the points, how you will do the integration, and what are the gaps. Because during the integration part, you might find some gaps that you need to mitigate. And one interesting part that is more political one, but I find very interesting, is vendor selecting. When vendor selecting is driven and is made only by 666 without taking into account the technical expectation, the compliance requirements, specific business needs, you can end up using a cloud vendor just because 666 accepted to go with a specific cloud vendor, even if it doesn't fulfill the needs of the application or of the organization itself. And this goes the discussion about the landing zone. And what is a landing zone? Let's think about a city, about metropolis. In the city, you have the water, you have the gas, you have the electricity. That basically are the utilities of that city. The same thing, we have the utilities when we are building, when we are migrating to cloud, or when we are building a cloud solution, like identity and access management, the policy part, the monitoring, the resources that are shared between different utilities, and so on. That is the landing zone, and we need to build that landing zone and to define what are the boundaries, how the landing zone communicates, how each utility needs to respect different rules, and how we can expand it. For example, think about electricity or a gas, how you can extend it when additional blocks are built. The same thing you need to define in the landing zone templates and strategies, and what is allowed or not to do at the moment in time when you add one or two systems, from the access and from the access management point of view, from the policy point of view, from monitoring, and so on. And these kinds of things are covering different aspects. The computation part, the networking part, storage data, and so on. And in the end, when you're defining the landing zone, you are defining exactly what are the pillars, how an application should be integrated in the landing zone, what are the hooks for each part, and also, and of course, you will have something that is fixed, that cannot be modified, and nobody accept any kind of changes. And also, you have the ones that might be a little bit more flexible, depending on the application needs, depending on what part of business you're covering. You might be more strict or more relaxed with some specific things. Now, once you have the landing zone, you need to ensure that the landing zone respects your compliance requirement, the policies, and all the things that are put there in place. How you can do that? Well, test-driven development. As we are testing an application, as we are testing a functionality, in the same way, we can define an acceptance criteria for a landing zone. We can have a definition of done, and we create tests. We can test the landing zone, we can expand, we can do refactoring, and so on. At the beginning, a landing zone might not look so complex. You would say, well, I don't need a test to be able to ensure that a specific access policy is respected. Really? Because if you will have 10, 15 teams that will work for 2 years in that migration project, if you need to migrate 200 applications, some of them might forget or not to be aware of that, and somebody might change the landing zone. So testing is very, very important. Why do enterprise needs to do the cloud adoption? Well, first of all, and the most important thing, it's not about cost of avoidance. It's about new revenue stream that is created directly and indirectly. Think about in the last 1 year and a half, if you had only physical shops and you wouldn't migrate it to online one, you might have a very big problem on staying on the market. So new revenue stream like online online marketplace and things like that were very important and could make a difference between to have a success or not. And what does a cloud migration mean? from this point of view? Well, first of all, we create a new business value. And also we are capable to enhance with modern features and capability. We are capable, for example, to deliver to more users from different countries. We might be able to integrate AI and ML that would allow users, based on the profiles, to do better recommendation about what things they would like to buy or what they would prefer, and so on. And now the biggest question is how we can do a cloud migration. What are the things that we need to be aware on each step? And this is where Microsoft is providing Microsoft Cloud Adoption Framework for Azure, so-called CAF. And also you will find that AWS is providing a very similar adoption framework. It is called in the same way, CAF. And also from the steps that needs to be done and that are covered are very, very similar. So when we are talking about cloud adoption from the migration point of view, we have 4 stages that we need to be aware. We need to define a strategy. After that, we are doing a plan. Then we are in the ready phase when we have a pilot, an MVP. We are building the initial landing zone. After that, we do adoption. Basically, once we migrate in our application, we start to migrate and to scale up the teams to be able to do in parallel multiple migration of different systems. And all over that part, we have the govern and the manage side. And we'll talk a little bit later about govern and manage, but we need to remember that for example, security, compliance, access policies are not only for production environment and only when we go live. They need to be started when we define the strategy, and we'll cover all the phases. And why I emphasize this, because I see before doing production, because people ignore how to do the governance part and how to do the cloud ops part. They start to have big issues when they go live or after a few days once they went live. Now, what we are doing when we define the strategy? First of all, we need to ensure that we have the right stakeholders on the table. We align with them. We identify who is our CSP, the cloud service provider, and we are trying to talk with them to identify what kind of partnerships we need to do with them. We identify what is the business justification and the KPIs that will drive the migration, and we define different strategy and we document them and so on. There are 2 tools that are pretty nice from CAF that are provided by Microsoft: is Cloud Journey Tracker and Business Outcome Template. And let's take a look on the first one. And why? Because basically, what is this tracker? Is the Cloud Journey Tracker is an assessment, a very nice assessment that we can follow. It has a list of questions. In most of the times, if you know very well the organization or you're part of the organization that is doing the migration, it will take, for example, 20-30 minutes to fill the survey. If you are working at an IT service company, it might take 1 or 2 days because you will need to go to different stakeholders to ask them different questions, to talk with them, and so on. But once you are able to fill the form, the output is exactly at what phase of adoption journey you are. What are the categories like strategy, plan, ready, govern, management, organize, where you are, how good you are on each area, and what are the things that you should do to be able to improve them. And that's pretty nice because on each area where you are not green, you're not in a very good shape, you have specific recommendation, list of tools, documentation, things that you need to take a look and to analyze to be able to improve the journey, basically the migration journey. And I would highly recommend just to go over this when you have some time and try to identify the areas where you can do some improvements and just take a look on the recommendations that are provided by Cloud Journey Tracker. The second phase is the plan phase. When you get the data and you do the analyze of the workloads and of the assets, and you are going forward with the business part, not only from the justification, but also you create a business case. This needs to be migrated because A, B, and C, and this is the outcome, this is the cost, this is the implication, and you are starting to have the high-level migration plan, especially when you have large and multiple applications that you need to migrate. It's very useful to have a migration plan because you might identify some patterns, 3 or 4 types of application type that you have, and each of them could go in a specific sandbox in a specific type, and you do the digital state assessment. One of the tools that I really like at this phase is the adoption plan template that help you to not start from scratch, just to use or modify a documentation template that can be used in the front of stakeholders, but also we have the Azure DevOps demo generator. Because at this phase, you might be required to do an MVP or to show to different stakeholders how you are planning to do different things. Now, Azure DevOps demo generator, what is allowing you to do is to automatically create in DevOps a pipeline, a specific thing. They automation testing, for example, pipeline from zero to automatically deployment, and so on. And you can automatically have that free Azure DevOps sandbox that you can use, and you can validate or invalidate different things, and can be a starting point from the way how you build, how you like to think about that, how you build, and so on. The ready phase is when the technical team are starting to build. You are starting to expand the landing zone. You are starting to develop that. You start to share the information and the plans with the rest of the organization. And in this phase, it is very important to remember that the landing zone itself, it is an iterative process and will have multiple versions. You will not have from day zero a landing zone that will not change. No, it will change, it will evolve in time. When you're starting to do the adoption phase, you already have one application already migrated to cloud, and you start to spin up multiple teams, and you're starting to do the migration itself, and you implement the desired migration plan to multiple applications across all the organization. Now we have the govern part where you design and enforce access control. You have the compliance requirements that you need to ensure that you are following, and so on. The governance part is covering all the phases, and this is why I would like to keep in mind from the define strategy to adapt. The govern part needs to be taken into account and analyzed. Here, a really nice template that I like to play with is the secure baseline process template that can help you to identify exactly what are the security things that you need to be aware, and how to document them, and how to make them compatible with cloud, not only with the on-prem system. On the management side, you have 3 things that you need to be aware of. Cloud ops, especially from managing the production workloads. You need to identify and to define the baseline for them. And also you need to identify exactly who is responsible for doing the cost optimization, changing the resource tiers, and so on. And like the governance side is covering all the phases from day zero until you go in production, and also after that, the full life cycle of the application or of the system that you are migrating to cloud. For this side, what I highly recommend to take a look on is the operation management workbook. That is not very useful, but also is covering all the aspects from the cloud ops point of view. Okay, now let's talk about the migration strategy and some things that I would like to make us aware of. First of all, when we're talking about migration, and I really like how AWS is presenting them, we have the rehosting, replatforming, repurchasing, refactoring, retire, and retain. And for example, in the case of rehosting, it's a classical lift and shift, On replatforming, it's similar with the lift and shift, but we identify sometimes some services that can be replaced or used from the cloud to improve our application, but many times without a direct impact on the code, on the system itself. I really like this image, how each type of migration is presented, because you can identify exactly what are the most important things that are done. And remember that in most of the cases, it's not very common, or it doesn't seem very common, to have a large migration of multiple applications to the cloud, where you say, well, we are doing only replatforming or only refactoring. In most of the cases, it's a combination between all of them. And don't try to identify exactly which one is applicable for you. Just try to identify based on the application that you are migrating, or based on the subsystem or the components, on which category they are part of. And don't ignore the retire and retain. Because yes, sometimes there are applications that are on-prem, the plan is to retire in 1 year time, or they'll not have too many users, and it doesn't worth it to do a migration to cloud. Or some of them are not used anymore, a legacy system, and if you switch off the server where they're hosted, nobody will notify them because data was already migrated to another system and the business already fulfilled by them. Now, because time is very short when you do such a migration, usually you look at rehosting when you have a very limited time frame. And the running costs of cloud are not so important. So if you want to go in cloud and have 3 or 6 months time window, then rehosting is the best way how you can ensure that in 3 months time you've done a full migration of 15 virtual machines with all the applications that are running there. If you have more time, or when, for example, cost optimization or the adoption of cloud needs to be higher, then you need to take a look and you need to take into account refactoring or replatforming. Also, a very common thing that is done nowadays is with repurchasing. And sometimes we are doing it without even realizing it. Think about the Exchange server that you might have on-prem. At the moment in time when you're starting and you start to use Office 365, basically you're doing a repurchasing, because you're on-prem system with a third-party one, most of the cases a software as a service, where it is similar from the business point of view, but you don't manage it anymore as you've done it in the past. Now, let's take on the example, and I selected this example because I really like the way how we are covering and how we can identify that for specific services, we are doing different activities. Think about a company that have a marketing tool, a CRM system. They need an email server. Also, they have a payment gateway with a web app payment. They have a document storage, an ERP system, a data warehouse, and so on. When I'm starting to take a look on such a system, you will say, well, this can be, for example, a full rehosting or a full refactoring. But it might take a while for refactoring or for rehosting. The running cost on Azure might be even much higher, or on AWS than on on-prem systems. So you are starting to analyze each component, each subsystem. For ESB system, it's very easily to replace it with Azure Service Bus with a minimal impact. After that, you have the account system and the voice IP service that you realize that there are custom tools and it doesn't worth it to replace them, because voice IP service will be retired from the one that you are using in the next 3 years, and the accounting system is so well integrated with the one that you are using and with your third-party provider, it doesn't make sense to change it, and that's pretty that's pretty normal. After that, you're taking a look on the data warehouse system, and you analyze and you realize that Azure Synapse it's a much better fit from this point of view. And this one we're talking about replatforming. The ETL part is a good match for Azure Data Factory, and the same thing, it's more a re-platforming part, especially with the support of SSIS if you are already using on-prem SQL Server, and also you're starting to replace other system and so on. And in the end, what we observe here, we had two systems that were re-platforming. Some of them were repurchasing. A few of them, especially the custom one, were refactoring, and the marketing tool we decided to retire because nobody used it anymore. Everybody was using Facebook and Google systems. So as you can see, it's a hybrid from this point of view from multiple ways how you do such a migration. Now, what are the most common paths? There are two common paths that I would like to mention. Is acting too soon. So you need to migrate 100 workloads. You go in production or you want to go in production with the first workload. To be able to do that, you are migrating the first 10 workloads. Before that, you are migrating the first workload, the MVP part. But before doing that, what you're trying to do, you're trying to have a full alignment with the organization that you are part of, with all the teams that are covering the Azure. And that's almost pretty impossible to do. And if you are waiting to have everything cleared, fully cleared, then you will wait a lot of time, a few months, until you will say that, okay, this was 100% clear and we can go forward. Another common blocker is acting too late. You have the first workload. After that, you have the first 10 workloads that are migrating to cloud. You are going in production with the first workload. After that, you are working the first 100 workloads. And you have the enterprise readiness assessment. And if you're not doing the enterprise readiness assessment and all the compliance security check from the beginning, you realize that you want to go in production with all the systems, but you're not able to do that. Because from the compliance point of view, from the security point of view, and so on, you didn't cover all of these items to have the green lights. So this part needs to be also be started, as I said, from the governance point of view, from day one, from the day zero. As you can see, the best development approach, or the recommended one, is when you have everything in place from the beginning. When you're starting to when you define the landing zone, the connected environment, you secure the landing zone, you identify the shared services, and in the end, you have the center of excellence inside cloud that are defining the processes, the procedures, and the things that you need to follow. There are a lot of migration tools that are provided by the Cloud Adoption Framework that are helping you to do the assess workloads, to do the deployment of the workloads, to do the release of the workloads, and to do the cost control. I highly recommend to take a look on them before you are starting to do a cloud migration to Azure. Just take a look on them, identify what is the purpose of each of them and how they can improve your cloud adoption, and keep them in mind all the time, and try to not reinvent the wheel over and over again. Now, my final thought is the following. If you're starting a project on Azure, take a look on Cloud Adoption Framework and Well-Architected Framework. If you're starting a project on AWS, do the same thing. Take a look on the Cloud Adoption Framework that AWS is provided, and the Well-Architected Framework that also AWS is providing. Also, GCP is offering similar frameworks. These frameworks are providing you the right templates, the best practices, and the things that you need to take into account and to be aware to avoid costs going down, to have good quality metrics, and to be able to go in production without having any kind of issues. Thank you very, very much, and we have a few minutes to respond to any questions.
Hey, thank you for that. That was amazing. There was a whole heap of information that was just put into the last 40 minutes or so. I can't see. Do we have a question in the chat? I can't see a question in the chat, but I think the most important question that I thought of is you have a whole load of links there. Do you by any chance have a blog post or anything with a link to all of these things that we can share on Twitter?
Yes, yes, of course. So I will publish my presentation, my slides, and with all the links on LinkedIn and also on Twitter. From there, you will be able to find a link to my blog. And on the blog itself, if you want to find more about Cloud Adoption Framework, you will find a series of posts where I'm covering all the tools that are provided by Microsoft when you're doing the cloud migration.
Awesome, thank you. And when you put it on Twitter and LinkedIn, can you do the hashtag #BuildStuffConf so that people can find it easily?
Yes, I'll do.
Awesome, thank you very much. I think that the big question that I have here, something that came up at the beginning. No, we actually have a nice question in the chat looking at it. Is cloud migration easier on Azure than on AWS? All your slides are Azure.
Yes. So the question was if the migration is more easier to be done on AWS than on Azure or vice versa. I would say that it is the same. Maybe from the code point of view, you are doing the integration with cloud services in a different way. But from the journey, from the things that you need to be aware, the things that you need to cover, the way how you do the governance and the management, the cloud part are almost the same. Yes, you are using different services, you are using different tools, but nowadays the tools and the services and the experience itself, it's very, very similar with one small exception. And I would like to mention, the exception is the following. Depending on the industry and what is the area that you want to cover, you might find better support from a specific cloud vendor. And a very good example here is GCP 3 or 4 years ago, where from the ML and AI point of view, it was the go-to cloud provider if you wanted big and large ML system to run. Nowadays, you have the same experience, but this is a very good example how things used to be 3 years ago. And yes, and I've been part of the teams where we work on .NET Core and running on top of AWS, on top of Lambda, and so on. And it was a big success. The problem was making .NET teams learning AWS services and the integration parts. And also I've seen a lot of Java applications that were built and are running with success inside Azure without any kind of problem. So technology, language, it's not so important. You have full support, especially when the service is in GA, in general availability. If they're in public or private preview, there might be some technologies that are not supported. But when you're talking about Azure, .NET, Java, Python, and JavaScript are in most of the cases supported for all of their services.
Awesome, thank you. And then the last question that I had was, you say at the beginning that one of the big issues is driving this purely from an IT perspective can be a problem and can cause issues. Do you have any experience and any advice on how to actually get the business involved in this? Should they turn around and say, well, that's an IT problem, you go away and deal with that?
So I would not recommend, or I wouldn't even start a cloud migration project, if you don't have the business stakeholder on the table. And why? Because yes, you don't need them through all their journey, but at least at the beginning, you need to understand what is the motivation behind the scene, why they want to do this kind of migration. It is because of cost optimization, it's because a new business stream value and things like that. Because if you don't understand what they are looking for, and if you don't define together with them a business KPI, how you will measure success at the end. For them, success doesn't mean that you can run a Java application inside Azure. It doesn't mean that you are running with success a .NET Core application inside a Lambda function. No. For them, success is in a clear KPI that has a direct revenue, or the number of hours that team needs to do to process documents is reduced, and so on. Availability, scalability, it's not a business driver. It's not, you cannot say that it's a business KPI. Business KPI needs to be defined together with business people, and sometimes for us, for technical people, it's hard to identify and to define a business KPI. But a project manager, a delivery manager, or a BA, it's the right person that can work together with business people to define and to shape what a business KPI means in their case.
Okay, awesome. Well, again, thank you very much. I hope that people got as much out of this as I did when looking at cloud migrations. I have seen plenty that failed, and it's great to get some insight into why that may possibly have happened. And I'm definitely going to use it moving forward. Thank you very much for your time this morning. And I believe we're about out of time, so we have a 20-minute break now before our next speaker to go and get some refreshments. Thank you very much. And bye-bye, Radu. And we'll see the rest of you later.
Cheers. Bye-bye.